The sun hung low over the desert highway, casting long shadows across the endless stretch of asphalt. Jake Callahan had been driving these roads for decades, but nothing could have prepared the hijackers for the mistake they were about to make. When they surrounded his rig with their weapons drawn, they thought he was just another trucker. They had no idea who he really was or what he was capable of. Before we dive into what happened next, have you ever been in a situation where someone underestimated you? Tell us in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more incredible stories. The sun hung low over the desert highway, casting long shadows across the endless stretch of asphalt. The air shimmered with heat, waves of it rising from the ground like ghosts. A lone truck rumbled down the road, its chrome grille reflecting the merciless sunlight. Inside, Hank Walker, a seasoned trucker with 3 decades behind the wheel, sipped his coffee, eyes steady on the road ahead. He wasn't a man who scared easily or of running dangerous routes had hardened him into someone who always expected trouble. The radio crackled, a warning from another driver. "Heads up, fellas, there's been some hijackings on Route 17. Looks like some bandits are getting bold." Hank smirked, rolling his shoulders. He'd heard it all before. He wasn't about to change his route because of a few desperate men thinking they could intimidate truckers. A mile ahead, 3 dust-covered SUVs sat parked haphazardly along the road's shoulder. Dark figures stood beside them, watching. Hank's instincts tingled. This wasn't a stranded family or some lost tourists. These men were waiting for something, or someone. As Hank's truck roared closer, one of the SUVs suddenly jerked onto the road, swerving wildly. Another shot forward from behind a dune, cutting him off. The trap was sprung. Hank let out a long breath, his hands tightening around the wheel. He slowed down, but not much. Slamming the brakes would make him a sitting duck. The lead SUV's windows were tinted black, but Hank could make out figures shifting inside. Another SUV pulled up alongside him, matching his speed. A man leaned out the window, waving a pistol, shouting something in Spanish. The third SUV was now behind him, boxing him in. Hank clenched his jaw. They thought they had him. The man with the gun signaled wildly, motioning for him to stop. Hank pretended to comply, nodding, his hand moving toward the dashboard. His fingers brushed against the hidden switch. The SUV in front slowed, forcing Hank's truck to a crawl. The men inside started stepping out, 3, 4 of them, all armed. Faces wrapped in cloth, weapons in hand, they moved with the confidence of men who had done this before. One of them, stockier than the rest, tapped the side of Hank's door with his rifle. "Sal, get out, now!" Hank exhaled through his nose, making a show of shifting the truck into park. He cracked his knuckles, a slow smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. These men had no idea what they had just walked into. Hank barely moved as the stocky man slammed the butt of his rifle against the truck's door. "I said get out," he barked, his accent thick, his impatience growing. The others circled like wolves, their fingers twitching near the triggers of their weapons. The leader, a taller man with a scar running down his cheek, approached the cab window, tapping on it with his pistol. "No más juegos, viejo," he growled. "Out. Now." Hank finally moved, exhaling slowly. He pushed open the door and stepped down, his boots kicking up dust as they hit the road. His eyes met the leader's scold, steady, unreadable. One of the younger men, a wiry kid with nervous hands, sneered and pointed his pistol at Hank's chest. "Hands up! Don't try anything stupid." Hank raised his hands slightly, just enough to appease them. "Relax, kid," he said, in a voice so calm it almost sounded bored. But his lack of fear only agitated them further. These were men who thrived on intimidation, who expected fear, compliance, and Hank wasn't giving them either. The stocky one took a step closer, jabbing the barrel of his rifle against Hank's ribs. "You think this is funny, viejo?" Hank didn't flinch. Instead, he glanced at the scarred leader. "You know how this goes? You want my rig? You want my cargo? Fine. But you sure about this? You sure you want my truck?" The leader hesitated. Just for a second. That hesitation made the others uneasy. They weren't used to a man standing this calm under their guns. The younger one's nerves finally snapped. He grabbed Hank's collar and shoved him back. "Enough talking! Give us the keys, now!" Hank let himself stumble slightly, playing the part just enough to keep them overconfident. Scarface stepped forward, his patience running thin. "We don't have time for this," he muttered. "Take him down. Find the keys." The order was given. One of the men cracked his knuckles. Another adjusted his grip on his rifle. They were ready to beat him down, to make an example out of him. What they didn't know? Hank had already made his move. His right boot pressed down, activating the hidden switch near his truck step. Behind them, the trailer locks released. The game was about to change. The gang of hijackers didn't realize it yet, but their window of control had just slammed shut. Hank's boot had triggered the silent release on his trailer's hidden compartment. Behind them, something shifted, something heavy. The gang remained focused on him, oblivious to the change. Scarface stepped closer, pressing his pistol against Hank's chest. "You should have just handed over the keys, viejo." Hank exhaled, slow and steady. Then, with the precision of a man who had done this before, he moved. His left hand shot up, grabbing Scarface's wrist and twisting it with bone-snapping force. The pistol discharged into the dirt as the leader cried out, staggering back. Before the others could react, Hank's right hand was already in motion. He struck the nearest thug across the face, sending him sprawling. Another reached for his rifle, but Hank was faster. He grabbed the barrel and yanked it downward, slamming his elbow into the man's jaw. The rest of the crew finally realized they were in trouble. One of them raised a gun, but before he could aim, boom! The sound of a shotgun pumping behind them turned their blood cold. They spun around to see two men stepping out of the trailer. Not just any men Hank's crew. One was a grizzled Marine vet, his shotgun leveled at the group. The other, a towering ex-Special Forces operator, cracked his knuckles, eyes cold and deadly. Hank dusted off his shirt and picked up Scarface's fallen pistol. He smirked. "You boys really picked the wrong truck." The air was thick with tension. The hijackers, moments ago so full of arrogance, now stood frozen in place. Scarface clutched his broken wrist, his face contorted in pain, while the rest of his crew stared at the shotgun leveled at them. Hank took a step forward, his expression calm but deadly. He wasn't smiling anymore. He wasn't playing along. "You boys had a good plan," he said, his voice steady. "Too bad you didn't do your homework." One of the thugs made a move, shifting his weight like he might try something stupid. Hank's crew didn't even flinch. The Marine cocked his shotgun with a CHCHK, and the ex-Special Forces operator cracked his knuckles again, sending an unmistakable message in it. Scarface, still cradling his wrist, snarled, "You don't know who we work for, old man. You think this is over?" Hank sighed. He had heard that kind of threat before. Every wannabe tough guy thought they were untouchable until they weren't. He stepped in close, so close that Scarface could feel his breath. "I don't care who you work for," Hank said quietly. "I care about one thing: you don't mess with a trucker's rig. And you sure as hell don't try to hijack a man who's been through worse than you could even imagine." He lifted his boot and stomped down on Scarface's pistol, grinding it into the dirt. The sound of metal scraping against gravel echoed like a final nail in the coffin. "Now," Hank said, glancing at his crew, "let's show these boys what happens when you try to take what ain't yours." The Marine veteran yanked a thick bundle of zip ties from his belt and tossed them to one of the hijackers. "Tie your boss up," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. The thug hesitated. Crack. Hank's fist drove into the man's gut, knocking the wind clean out of him. "I said, tie him up." Wheezing, the hijacker obeyed, looping the zip ties around Scarface's wrists, now swollen and useless. The others followed, their faces a picture of humiliation. Once they were all bound, Hank picked up Scarface's radio. "You boys have a boss, right?" He clicked the button. "Go ahead, call him, tell him you failed." Scarface's eyes widened in sheer panic. Wait. Hank didn't wait. He pressed the radio to the thug's lips. "Go on, tell him. Tell him how a couple of truckers turned your crew into a joke." The silence on the other end of the radio was deafening. And then laughter. Not from Hank, not from his crew, but from the man on the other end. "You mean to tell me you idiots hijacked the wrong truck?" The voice on the radio chuckled. "Enjoy your retirement, Scarface." The radio clicked off. Scarface's face drained of all color. He wasn't just beaten, he was done. The sun hung low over the desert highway, casting long shadows over the wreckage of Scarface's failed hijacking. Hank stood near his rig, wiping the dust off his knuckles. The fight was over, but the lesson? That would last a lifetime. The hijackers sat in the dirt, wrists bound, faces bloodied not just from fists, but from their own humiliation. They weren't just beaten physically, they were ruined. Their boss had abandoned them over the radio, their reputations shattered. Out here, in their own world of criminals and outlaws, failure like this was a death sentence. One of Hank's crew, a fellow veteran, leaned against the truck and smirked. "Think they'll try this again?" Hank shook his head. "Not on us. Not on anyone." Because that was the real message here. It wasn't just about winning. It was about making sure these kinds of men thought twice before they tried this on anyone else. Hank turned to Scarface, crouching down to meet his eye. "You picked the wrong truck today," he said, his voice steady. "And now your name means nothing. Your crew is gone. Your boss just cut you loose." He nodded toward the road. "You'll have a long walk to think about that." Scarface didn't say a word. He couldn't. With that, Hank stood, adjusting his cap as he turned back toward his truck. The job wasn't over. There was still a long way to go, still a delivery to make. But one thing was clear, these men had learned a lesson they'd never forget. As the convoy rumbled back onto the road, the dust swallowing up the humiliated hijackers behind them, Hank let out a slow breath. He had seen a lot in his time war, violence, men who thought they were invincible, and he had learned one truth that always held. Some fights you walk away from, some fights you finish, and some fights you make sure they never happen again. What would you do? Have you ever been in a situation where someone underestimated you? A moment when you had to stand your ground and teach someone a hard lesson? Let us know in the comments below. Read every single one. And if you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another incredible real-life tale. Until next time, stay safe out there. And remember, some people pick the wrong fight, and they always pay the price.